started what we're calling our cardiovascular system. And because in this system, did you text me?
Yeah, you said okay.
So in this system, we have it broken up into a chapter for the blood, chapter for the heart, and a chapter for the vessels. And so this is making up our cardiovascular system. We are in the chapter about blood. We left off at the point where we've been talking about the system. We're looking at the fact that blood is a liquid connective tissue and how it is a colloid. Because one of the things about blood is it's going to have all these materials in it that get to keep their properties. All right? Because we have whole red blood cells. We have little platelets in it, even though they're not a whole cell, but they're still together. We've got the white blood cells. We've got all these things that are flying, I shouldn't say flying, moving within the blood. So that was pretty much the point we had left off. And we mentioned the production of blood. Thank you. And how we as adults, now note that some of the information is going to be about children, some about adults. But an adult, look at what we get to produce per day. You know, that's a lot of material. Now, of course, as you get older, that production does slow down a little bit. But this production, the term that I think I wanted you guys to remember, hemopoiesis. Because when we looked at red blood cells, but note, this is not the only particle, okay? So when we look at heme, all right, let that kind of bring to mind that red blood cell. Now, heme, the poiesis, okay, what we're looking at here, we're going to get the production of the red blood cells, but we're also going to get the production of those leukocytes, the white blood cells, and other formed elements, our platelets. Okay? Now, the tissue that's going to give rise to it, I think I tried to get you guys to think about that spongy. When you look at bone, for example, the long bones of the body, to that outer portion, you have your compact bone, but to the inside of it, you had the spongy bone. Do you guys remember that? Okay, and one of the cool things about it, this is where we're going to have the production. So it's in that spongy bone. When children are born, until almost the time they stop growing, it is red bone marrow. Once we're an adult, there are only certain areas of the body that are going to be the red bone marrow. Children need the constant production of the red blood cells because they are growing. We are dependent for the children to be able to get that oxygen and those nutrients as much as possible because their cells, all of them, of the body, are growing. So when a child, you know, coming up tells you they're hungry, chances are they are, okay? Because their body is working harder. All right? I mean, their production is very high. Do you guys remember us talking about the one stem cell? Okay? The hematopoietic stem cell, the HSC. Once again, the stem cell is going to give rise. Now, here's one of the things that I wanted to point out again. We're going to have one give rise to lymphocytes. Note, only the T and the B cell, those lymphocytes, because that is important in our immune system. All right? The remainder of the cells, this is where we're going to have that unit from the stem cell giving rise to everything else. Our red blood cells, those erythrocytes, our platelets, and then the remainder of our leukocytes, the white blood cells. So, if we take a peek at that red blood cell, like I said, very much looks like a donut, all right? Because it's concave to the middle with the ridges, those bumped up ridges around it, and their job, gases. Their major job, oxygen. A lot of times when we think about those gases of the body, oxygen, CO2, we tend to think that they're both transported on that red blood cell. They can both be transported, but the most important one is the oxygen. Okay? So the body had to figure out a way to get the CO2 back to the lungs so that we could breathe it out. And it did. And it actually requires that CO2 going to the blood, not necessarily a red blood cell. Okay? So the red blood cell, they have a lifespan of roughly 120 days. I'm sure you guys already know that. And when they are formed, because that's what's going to happen in that bone marrow, when they're formed, yes, they are formed just like other cells of the body. They've got the nucleus, they've got the other organelles, and until they are about 4 to 7 days old, they will keep those organelles. Why? Because to have, or for that red blood cell to make its product, we've got to have the nucleus, we've got to have ribosomes, we've got to have endoplasmic reticulum, and therefore it needs to make its product. What is the product of the red blood cell? Does anybody know what the protein is? The hemoglobin. Ah, there's my heme again. This is where it comes from, all right? Because the product of the red blood cell is that protein, hemoglobin. And until about 4 to 7 days old, it wants to make as much hemoglobin as possible, because at the somewhere between 4 to 7 days old, it needs to spit out its nucleus and organelles, so that the only thing it can have room for is that hemoglobin protein. Because the hemoglobin protein is the reason that that red blood cell can transport first oxygen and CO2 if it has to. All right? So once it spits it out, the job now, simply transport the gases. It doesn't want to have to, well, first of all, it's not going to reproduce itself, make a copy, because the red blood cell is formed in the bone marrow. All right? So the red blood cells are not going to simply go from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8. All right? The production of them, bone marrow. Now, because their job, oxygen, I can't make it any more clearer than what I'm making right now. Their goal, their job, what they need to do, what we need them to do, transport oxygen. Okay, well, if I got to deal with CO2, I will, but it doesn't really want to. So what it will do, this red blood cell has an enzyme. Enzymes are proteins. Enzymes are catalysts so that we can help speed up a reaction. So here's the way it works. When blood travels to the tissues at the cellular level, it's at that cellular level everything takes place. So if I'm in a tissue, let's say that's my tissue. Y'all know I'm not an artist. And that tissue contains my cells. My cells will have their nucleus. They'll have their endoplasmic reticulum. They'll be doing what they're supposed to do at that tissue level. Is everybody with me? Now, it's at this level right here. Let's see. I don't know where all my expos went. I think they fell out in my car. So at this level right here, I'm going to end up with capillary beds. That capillary bed is connected on one end to a little arteriole, which will be connected to my arteries. The other end will be connected to a venule, which is connected to my veins. Is everybody with me? So that means blood flow. Arteries carry blood in what direction?
To the heart. To the heart.
Down.
Down, away. Arteries away from the heart. So blood flow from arteries is to the cells. Does that make sense? Now, veins carry it back to the heart. So my blood flow is to the heart. At this level right here of the capillary bed, is where everything occurs in your body. Everything occurs in your body at the capillary beds. They're all over your body. It is the only area exchange can occur.